Grief is something that has touched so many of us all this past year, but is dealing with the loss of a loved one harder for men than women? Well, psychologists say men can experience something called masculine grief, meaning they are less likely to show their emotions. They feel like they have to get over a loss quicker and also come up with a solution to their grief. Now, James, I know you lost your amazing dad this year, so does this resonate with you?
Yeah, it does. I don't think men suffer with grief any different to women. I think everyone deals with grief differently, every human being. I wasn't very good at all. It was something which put me in a very dark place. And I think I started grieving the day I found out that he was going to die. So I was grieving for about a year, and then, obviously, then we lost him, and then you start grieving again because you've lost them. And it's the worst thing I've ever been through. Wouldn't wish it on anyone, but unfortunately, you know, it happens to many, many people. It's going to happen to everyone at some stage. And as my dad would say, unfortunately, it's part of life, and he wouldn't want me to be the way I was 6 months ago. And I think that's part of the reason why, you know, I can at least talk about it now, where 6 months ago I would literally be in tears because it was so hard and so raw.
But you never felt any... Sorry, do you think that some men do feel, though, that they have to be strong and...
Well, it's a big... That thing of saying masculine grief, they come up with these new terms for things, but, I mean, it's always been like big boys don't cry. There's always been this thing that there's conditioning, and I think that in some families there was that sort of, you know, you don't cry, you put... But you never felt any pressure to be like that.
I never felt any pressure.
It's wonderful that you've shared how grief-stricken...
Yeah, I mean, I cried pretty much every day for a year. And I have no shame in saying that. My dad was one of my closest friends, and I miss him every day. And I don't think it's ever going to go. It maybe just gets less, I don't know, less painful, I hope. But every day, even now, I still think about it, still get upset, because it was kind of cruel that he was taken the way he was and, you know, just retired, just started enjoying life.
And also because, as well, during the pandemic, you couldn't even be with him a lot of the time.
No, couldn't go into hospital. He was in hospital sometimes for months at a time, where he was so ill. And many, many people were going through that, you know. Many people were, you know, some people were burying their children, which must be absolutely horrific. I can't even imagine. But I didn't... You hear of people losing loved ones, and you always have empathy, and you hear of people dying of cancer, which is a horrific disease. But until you go through it yourself,
I know.
You don't know what people were going through,
No.
and it is absolutely horrendous.
Yeah, and everyone does grieve differently, doesn't
Well, yeah,
right?
my father died about, 5 years ago now, and I'm quite the opposite. I felt relief. Not because of his death, but I think because of the relationship that I had with him was finally put to bed. It was an abusive relationship, and he was an alcoholic, and he died from alcohol poisoning, drinking just too much on that one night. And for me, it was a great relief to see the actual coffin going into the ground. And that's, I thought, this is abnormal. And am I normal or abnormal?
Did you feel a bit guilty because you felt like that?
No, I didn't.
Well, that's
because I thought,
good,
this
though.
is how I feel. And this is what I said to my family. I said, this is how I feel. I feel like the weight is not only off my shoulders, but his as well.
Yeah,
you know,
because some people do feel guilt that they haven't been around their parents enough.
Yeah.
And things like that.
But my sister, Melanie, like my younger sister, was grief-stricken.
But she had a completely different relationship with your dad.
Completely different. And I always say that it's based on the relationship, I think, that you have with that person. Like Amber, the 41-year-old lady, who was one of my best mates, who was 6 months pregnant, you know, which I've written extensively about in my books and things. You know, she died of cancer, which was just absolutely awful, leaving 3 small kids under 5 and 6 months pregnant. She had to choose between that baby or her life so she could spend a little bit more time with the, you know, 1-year-old. And that just brought me to tears, to the point where I was at her funeral and could not speak. I was inconsolable.
Yeah.
And so I don't feel guilty about my dad because he had his life. He'd done all of that. And he was very specific about his funeral, and it was very sort of I am me. And so for me to see that sort of go to bed...
But it's
for you.
Yeah,
it's
closure
funny,
for me.
It's funny how many people do fall out, like families fall out, because they grieve differently.
But it makes me feel sad for you that you didn't have the same relationship with your father that I did with mine.
I would have loved that.
Yeah, that's the only thing that I feel sad about.
But I have that relationship with my mother.
Yes.
Do you see what I'm saying? And I think I'd be just devastated, you know, if anything was to happen to my mum. And especially that she's in Australia and can't get to this country and we can't go there.
Awful.
It would be just horrendous to be 10,000 miles away if anything untoward should happen. So...
Yeah, grief's horrible.
Yeah,
horrible.
It's never good, I think, for anybody, is it? I mean, you know, I don't know anyone that has...
We've all lost someone to cancer
Yeah.
on this panel. I mean, my mum, it's 8 years ago since my mum died, and I think back sometimes and think, because I always say that my mum lived with cancer for 20 years and died of it for a month, because it was that last month that she was so, you know, brilliant at sort of living with it. And but I always think, oh my God, I went back to work a week after my mum died. I was on tour with the play Steel Magnolias, and I remember going back to... And yet, formally, whenever I'd thought about one of my parents dying, I thought I wouldn't be able to do that. But it was like a delayed reaction. I did grieve her when she died, but because I was working and I, you know, I went back to work. And then now my grief for my mum blindsides me. So, for example, like today, I'm talking about her and I loved her so much, but I'm all right. But I can be just walking down a road or in the shops and there'll be a smell of perfume or there'll be a sound. And I am in racking sobs no matter where I am. And obviously I've been faced with, you know, my dad has still got a long way to go, but faced with, you know, with the possibility of losing him. And, you know, my dad's the only person in the world that's never judged me. And so I'm like you with that relationship. And I felt sadness when Craig told that story.
And I think it is the way you lose someone. You know, when my mum died, she had Alzheimer's, so for the first year of her death, it was like you, it was a relief for me, because I hated seeing her like that. It was a year down the line when I started grieving, because then I remembered who she used to be. And like with Bernie now, like you, all of a sudden out of the blue, I can be at traffic lights and just think, oh, I'll text Bernie, and then I go, oh, she's not here. And it's those moments that are so hard. So, anyway, if you need any help yourselves with grief, the ITV website has details on places you can go.